Hi, I'm Robin Thomason, and I'm the Director of CDA's Practice Support Center. We're really happy today to be sponsoring this webinar where we're going to talk about negative reviews and how you address those. This has become an ongoing topic for our members as we're entering a social media revolution, kind of, and while we don't think we're doing anything, believe it or not, we're all a part of it. So we're very happy to have that. We're going to be covering a lot of information today. We're going to be talking about defamation. We're going to talk about addressing reviews, whether it's publicly or privately. What is a fraudulent review? We all talk about it, but really, how do we address it? And then we're also going to talk about how many of you have thought about your online reputation. That is important in today's world. As you come up with questions, please feel free to ask those. We're going to answer them, however, at the end of today's presentation. Also, we don't answer any questions by chat, but if you have a question, please feel free to put it up there and we'll see if we can answer that for you. I'm going to go ahead and get started because I think we've got a lot of information that's going to be very useful for you today. I'm happy to have Carla Christensen with us. Carla is very knowledgeable in social media, dentistry, but really her focus has become on addressing negative reviews for our dentists. Carla, how would someone get involved in talking to dentists and advising them on how to address negative reviews?
Well, Robin, as you well know, having been with TDIC Risk Management for 8 years prior to becoming director of the Practice Support Center, our advertising slogan, protecting dentists, it's all we do, truly is our philosophy. It is the way that we approach our job. And as such, I began to realize that when we were speaking with our dentist on the phone about dismissing patients, potentially addressing a request for a refund, record maintenance, that we were also encountering questions that had to do with, hey, my patient just posted a negative review online. What do I do? And I was intrigued. I was really interested in how I could prepare an appropriate response for our policyholders, for our member dentists, because I felt a lot of what they were stating. I felt their frustration. I knew they were small business owners. I knew that they were very upset and angry about there was the potential for this to damage their business. And I really felt that I was tasked with trying to come up with an appropriate response for them so that they could move on, so that they could resolve this matter and move on. When a dentist would call me and say, I did a 3-unit bridge for a woman, and you know, from all I can tell, she was satisfied. She was happy. I heard no complaints. My staff heard no complaints. My office manager walked in today and told me that she posted a negative review online. And I think what she's saying is absolutely false, and I want it removed. How do I do this? Well, at that point I knew that I needed to go further and research what is going on and what can we tell our dentists when they call about this. Part of that reasoning was due to the fact that, like fee disputes, an online negative review could potentially evolve or escalate into a situation where it becomes a claim against the standard of care that you have performed. In other words, you could potentially respond to the negative review in a fashion that violates the patient's privacy, that causes the patient to become more irate and actually move on to speaking to an attorney who's going to go for the big bucks. They're going to turn this into a standard of care issue. And for that reason, I wanted to ensure that what we were doing was protecting you from the possibility of that happening. I went online, tried to find what I could. There wasn't a lot of information there. I also spoke with the attorneys who work with TDIC. I also checked out user guidelines for Yahoo, for Google, for Yelp. And what I found out, while at the same time it was fascinating, it was also very troubling. I began to realize that for me personally, and also for our dentist, what we had been discussing as being defamatory, as being something that was injurious to the dentist, in fact, it wasn't.
Yeah, that's a good question, and the way you've put it out there, Carla, and I think you're right. Being in dentistry and you and I having a risk management background and working with our members, things are different than they were 10 years ago. A patient would write you a nasty letter and you or your office manager would address it. Now suddenly it's online and it's taken on something completely different. You mentioned something interesting. Talk about what is defamation. What if a doctor believes it's occurred? I mean, what is defamation?
Well, defamation is really what I would consider a catch-all term for a statement that is harmful to a reputation. It can be malicious, usually it's intentional. Defamation is not a criminal activity, it is actually a civil tort. And it's something where you can sue somebody who has defamed you, but it's pretty well understood that there are certain criteria that must be met. With defamation under the legal sense, it's really trying to help with conflicting interests there. You have people who potentially could go online and basically state a lie simply to ensure that they are in some way harming you, and we want to protect you against that, and that's what the law is for. But at the same time, it's a very gray line between what is public opinion, what is the right to provide First Amendment, ability to just go out there and say what you have to say without the fear of retribution. So it has to do a lot with free speech. There are two types of defamation. One would be libel, and that is written. The other is slander, and that is spoken. However, they both fall under the umbrella of defamation, and sometimes people will simply say it was a defamatory statement that was used. The criteria that a defamation claim must meet has to do with the fact that the statement is published. Now, with libel, you can certainly understand that that would be written online, in a magazine, in a newspaper. With being spoken, let's say somebody is on a morning talk show and they make a statement about a very public person, and the statement is believed to be not only false, but could damage that person's reputation. So that's publishing that information for all to see. Publishing something that is in writing could even be posting something on your door that you don't see until after the weekend, but you know that other people have come by and seen it, and you're worried about what was stated. There's also the need for the statement to be false. And we're not talking about subjectively false, the person's opinion. We're talking about objectively false, which means that you have to be able to prove what was stated is in fact untrue. In addition, it needs to be unprivileged or not privileged. With respect to that, we're talking about within the legal state. Let's say you have somebody who is sitting in the jury box, and the jury box, but in the witness box, and they're making a claim, or they're making a comment or a statement that is in some way harmful to someone, and at that time it is what is known as privileged. It's a privileged communication. If they willfully do it, potentially that could be perjury, and that's what they would be charged with. But as for the ability to then file a defamation claim against that individual, usually it's understood, no, within the auspices of the court proceeding, it's not something that you can come back and ding them twice on. The other thing is that the statement must be injurious. With that, again, malicious. There has to be intent. An individual can post online, "This is the worst dentist I have ever been to in my life." If you add to that, "in my opinion, this is the worst dentist I have ever been to in my life," it shows, once again, that's not an objective, factual claim. It's subjective. And that's the most important thing to understand about looking at your reviews, reading them, and realizing, are they stating fact that is a lie, or are they stating their opinion? And reviews are created for the purpose of people sharing their opinions. So therefore, it is highly questionable that what you are reading is in fact defamation.
So when a doctor or the office contacts you and says, "I believe there was a defamatory comment made," what advice are you giving them?
Well, what has been important for us to understand, and when I say us, the TDIC Risk Management Advice Line, is first to get the individual to determine whether or not they in fact know who posted it. And right now we'll go from the perspective of you do. You are able to look at the posting and determine who the patient is, and also that what they are stating is something where you know you have seen this individual. Once you've established that, then it's important that you pull their chart, because again, you're looking for anything that's stated within their posting that can be refuted by the documentation that you have within the chart. Once you've done that, and if you've determined, okay, yeah, I'm not seeing anything here that truly matches what we have charted, but at the same time, I am still upset about the information that they have given. Well, it's really where you have to put your anger in check. You know, I frequently say, don't get angry, get answers. Try not to go out and provide anything that would be injurious to you by breaking patient confidentiality, calling out to a colleague to say, you know, I think you saw this individual too. What can you tell me about what they told you about my interaction with them? Do everything you can to try to put the post in perspective. And by that, I mean, there is a lot of information out there. In fact, if I went online and I Googled dentist and reviews, you will find that the majority of the negative reviews are specific to the way the patient was treated. We're not talking about treatment here. We're not talking about standard of care. We're talking about patients who feel that staff was rude, their appointment was rushed, they weren't completely communicated to in terms of the treatment that was going to be received, that the fee was not what they felt was adequate, or the fee was something that they didn't feel someone had discussed it with them. One of the most effective tools in dentistry today is communication. And when I say that, I'm talking about not only what you relay to the patient, how well you listen to them and their concerns, and how well you document that. So all of that will help you in helping the individual. Also, when you're putting it in perspective, you have to look at what are they complaining about. It's hard not to personalize it. It's very difficult not to sit there and think, okay, I know this patient, I can't believe they've gone this far with this issue. I can't believe they didn't come to me directly to discuss it. You need to put that aside. One of the things that you must remember is that you are trying to absorb the information so that if it helps, it will improve your practice so that you can learn something from it. Certainly if you know who the individual is, it's a good idea to reach out to them, potentially to try and contact them directly by phone. Let them know that you've come across their posting. Ask them if you can discuss with them what the issue is. Potentially, you may be able to get them to remove it. And I have had discussions with doctors when once they understood, okay, you're telling me it's not defamation, I shouldn't be talking to an attorney, I can't sue this person, then they retreat some and they say, all right, so you think it's okay if I contact the patient? I will do that. I'm just going to give it a shot. And it's very important that the dentists do this. The dentist is a representative of the practice, and they're the ones that the patients want to hear from. So I would not defer to your office manager. I would not defer to your staff. I would take on ownership of that yourself. That is very important.
You brought up some really great points, Carla, in the sense of when we talk about what patients and what their perception of an office is, it's one of those where you go, I don't know that always a patient will understand a great crown and a good crown, but I know if the person that addressed me when I walked in looked at me in the eye. I know if the doctor didn't speak to me when I asked questions. So it's funny how a lot of the issues that we come across isn't really related to the clinical side of dentistry, but really the communication side and what is a patient's perception on it. Now that's not saying that everything that goes on and that's posted is related to that. We know after looking there's things on clinical. So we've talked a little bit about the doctor calling and making sure it is the doctor, that it wasn't sent over to an office manager, and the doctor is taking responsibility as the owner of the practice. Mm-hmm. But what happens when they want to do it publicly? I don't want to make a phone call. I want to address this issue publicly.
This is a very sticky wicket, and this is probably something that you have heard of in the news, specifically with some dentists here in California. I can relay the case of Dr. Yvonne Wong because that has been public, it's been printed in the newspapers, and the outcome unfortunately was not good for Dr. Wong, but it does have to do with her attempting to address publicly through the legal system where she felt she had been wronged. There is also a pediatric dentist in the southern part of California, and this has been even a greater issue because it was a parent who went onto Facebook and created a hate page against the doctor. It was a situation where, unfortunately for Dr. X, he did attempt to respond publicly. He handled interviews with Dr. Bicuspid. It became a situation that escalated, and unfortunately, even though the father had released information related to the son's treatment. It wasn't for this doctor to continue that dialogue in a public forum. It is a violation of the patient's confidentiality. It can visit upon you a visit from the dental board. You could have greater issues than simply a hostile web page or a negative posting. With regards to taking it to the level of being public, we would say do not mention anything in relation to the treatment that has been provided. Are there ways in which you can actually say something online in response to the posting? Yes, you can. Specifically with Yelp, it has a place where you can add an owner's comments. I would caution you to be generic. You don't want to sound like a broken record. I mean, you don't want to have 3 negative reviews and the same response for each one. And again, I would task the dentist with making the statement. Generally, it's understood that if you apologize for the person feeling that the experience that they had was less than stellar, if you indicate that you're available to speak with them about their issue, if you make it clear that you appreciate the feedback. You don't want to be argumentative. You don't want to be defensive. Again, it's not the patient who posted who you're really trying to aim your communication at. It's your prospective patients. They want to see that you are actually capable of saying, you know what, I hear you, I get it, I'm listening. You don't want to post that, well, I really wish you had come to me first before posting it online. Boy, it sure would have been nice if we could have talked about this 3 days ago. However, as it stands right now, if you give me a call, let's see what we can do. That's not good. You want to be professional. You want to be respectful. Even if the posting is the most vitriolic thing you have ever seen, even if they call you names, you remain above the fray. It truly has to be something where your patients are going to read this, your prospective patients and your current patients, and they're going to say, you know what, he doesn't sound like such a bad guy, or she really seems to be trying here. I'm going to take it for what it is. It's a bad apple, and it's not going to ruin the rest of the bunch.
And in light of, I mean, I love you talking about the prospective patients that are coming in, because that really is the audience. When we look at the postings and how we all utilize Yelp and how we're utilizing it for restaurants, and we look at it, and you're absolutely correct. If I look at it and someone's done a post and said, it's the worst food I've ever gotten, and someone from the restaurant comes on and says, I'm sorry for your experience, we really strive to please our patrons, I feel like it was just a bad day.
Yes.
And I'm willing to give that person another chance. So in light of that, what is the advice you would say, don't make matters worse? What should they do?
Well, I can give a couple of case examples here. The first had to do with father and son dentists. And this was a call that I received, and in reality, it was son who had provided the treatment. It was the father who felt that the postings by the patient were not accurate, in fact, were defamatory. Again, I had a discussion with senior dentist, and I explained to him that no, they were actually just the opinion of the patient, and it wasn't something that he should concern himself with, especially since it had been 5 years before he made the call to us. This is 5 years of anger, angst. It was something where he was still seething, so you can understand that, and certainly maybe you have encountered this yourself. It is very difficult to let go. It wasn't even the senior dentist, it was his son. However, what he wanted to do was to know, what can I do to take this public? Unfortunately, the doctor chose to reach out to a colleague who treated the patient after his son did. He knew of this dentist, but the dentist had not referred to their practice, and his son had not referred to the dentist he called. So I'm not even going to go in at length about how that is a violation of patient privacy. You must have a release of records authorization from the patient in order to do it. But more importantly, what he did was he stirred the pot. He knew that his son had provided treatment that his colleague well, let me put it this way. He knew his son had not provided treatment. It was treatment that the son had recommended for the patient. The patient refused, thinking it was too expensive. She had returned to this previous dentist and ended up actually having the treatment done by that doctor. When Senior became aware of that, he called his colleague and he told him what the patient had done to his son. The other dentist, feeling their frustration, said, well, she's a pretty good patient of mine. Why don't I just call her and see if she's willing to remove the post? Again, we're talking about a posting that was over 5 years old. Unfortunately, the colleague's request of the patient caused her to actually go back online and add additional information to the post. It bumped it up, it made it more current, and it also reflected the fact that, geez, isn't this odd? I don't even remember this dentist, and yet it appears that his father reached out to my current dentist and asked me to remove it. Why didn't they contact me themselves? So you can understand and appreciate that sometimes taking it public may not even mean that what you're doing is posting something online. It could potentially be that you think that you are doing the best thing for yourself, for your practice, but it's not. It has to be carefully thought through. And that is why we would encourage you to only use the owner's comments, to reply in a public fashion, but again, to keep them generic. The other thing that I can mention is what is known as the Streisand effect. And that is named after Barbara Streisand. And it has to do with the fact that she had a house that was featured on an architectural website. She was very upset that they showed a photo of her house without her permission. In going after the company that did this, she created more of an interest in her property than would have ever been received had she just stayed quiet. So the other side of this coin is that there is the potential for you to create a mountain out of a molehill. You don't want people suddenly interested in and Googling your name and actually pulling up the fact that you have had an ongoing legal issue with somebody based upon the fact that they wrote one bad review.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting, Carla, because you spoke on this topic at the CE Getaway, and I always remember a dentist in the audience that actually talked to you about it and said, there is that, I didn't know it was even called the Streisand effect, and I like that, but that, you've got 20 great reviews and you have one bad review. And by taking that public, sometimes you are putting into question maybe those 20 great ones because you focus. And the dentist in the audience had said there are times when I don't respond to that, as you said. You got to kind of fight your battles. You had talked a little bit when we first got started today about there are times when things are going to be posted and you don't have a clue who it comes from.
Yes.
That it can be, a patient that has never been to your practice, kind of the father-son deal really is there was an issue there. It could be a peer. It can be, competitors. It's a different climate we're in right now. Also, it can be a disgruntled employee.
Definitely.
So what happens?
In that particular situation, again, you have to be able to prove this. And I've had plenty of dentists call and say, well, I can't prove it, but if I could get Yelp or whomever the administrator is for this website to release that information, then I can go after them. Well, it's very difficult to get website administrators to just willy-nilly say, here you go. It's all a matter of protecting the interest of their consumers, of their users. Generally, you would at that point need to speak with an attorney, and they could tell you whether or not they feel that you truly have a credible case to put forward a subpoena to request that information. Other than that, if there's anything that you can point to in the posting that maybe only a disgruntled employee would know because it is proprietary information, it has to do with a situation which occurred in the office, you know that the individual was present on that date. All of these things are facts that you can bring into evidence, but I do believe that what it would require would be for you to sit with an attorney and to discuss the situation. Now, you're thinking, well, how do I respond online? You just told me provide an owner comment, and I'm thinking I never saw this patient. How do I do that without being defensive and also without really making more people think, well, what's going on here? Use the same response that you would even if this individual had been a patient within your practice. No one's going to know that what you suspect. They only know here's a negative posting, and sometimes ignoring it, even once again, if it is the type of posting which you feel like, oh my gosh, that is so bad, and it can't be defamation because they're all of the comments are, I think, I feel, I think this doctor is an alcoholic. I feel like he was leering at me. I believe she left while I was under sedation and didn't return for an hour. All of these things are opinions. So, again, the best thing that you can do is provide a response where you're indicating the information that you've provided. We would like to speak with you about this. We are sorry if you felt this way. We are sorry if you felt that this was the experience that you had within our practice. Again, you're showing whomever reads it, okay, doctor is trying. You might feel like, okay, if I do that, then I'm giving credibility to the review. I'm telling whoever is reading it, oh, this must have really happened. Look, the doctor's reaching out. Honestly, I think that you have individuals who will read that review and say something's wrong with this one. What they're stating just doesn't sound even right. They have a little bit of, and I'm no licensed psychologist, but they have a little bit of what I would think is some abnormal personality issues here. I mean, you have to credit those people who are reading the reviews with the ability to discern what is real and what is not. The other thing is, if you have someone who reads a review of that level and that causes them to say, I'm not coming to this doctor's practice, those are the individuals that truly you do not want to come to your practice because they're incapable of making that distinction. So again, a negative review, as hurtful as it can sometimes be a situation where it brings light to information that you can act upon, but if you can't, as much as possible, try and put it behind you. Try to minimize the effect of it by giving a fairly common response and moving on.
And you're right, Carla. Everything is different because we think of it as being online. But, let's we talk about patients that request refunds. They're upset at treatment. They're upset for whatever reason. The advice we still give is we want our patients to be happy and satisfied with the treatment they received. You're not apologizing, and you're not even saying what you said is correct, but what you're saying is, I hear what you're saying, and we want you to be happy, and that's what we're kind of talking about just now. It's bigger. It's online.
Yes.
So let's have this review, and we've got it on there. We don't know who it is. It could be, it really is wrong. Is there any way that reviews can be removed? Can they get taken off?
For Yelp and other reviewer sites, you really should go in and take a good look at the user guidelines. They generally tell you what will constitute the ability to remove a review. And you do have to meet those criteria. Generally, it is some way in which you can, in fact, make it clear that it's fraudulent. And how that is done, I honestly cannot tell you. I do know that there are various entities out there, such as Demandforce, they're endorsed by CDA, who may be able to assist you with that. So it's honestly not something that I have seen routinely done. You also do not want to try and upload positive reviews to push down the negative. There are algorithms and criteria that are used by websites that can detect that. So again, if you want to try and solve the situation to the best of your ability, the most that you can potentially do is to show potential patients, hey, I hear you, let's talk about this.
And I've heard about it, and I think others have heard about it, Carla, but we hear of dentist offices that want to sue Yelp. Does that happen? Can you do it? What is the case there?
Well, specific to Dr. Wong's case out of Foster City, California, where she not only took it upon herself to sue the parents of the pediatric patient, but she initially brought in Yelp as one of the defendants in the case. And I can let you know that in 1996, Congress passed what is known as the Communications Decency Act. Really what it is the ability for websites such as Yelp, any websites where they handle reviews to be protected from this type of action. They can have third parties post information and they will not be held liable for that content. So with Dr. Wong's case, it did not push through. It did not continue in terms of being successful in including Yelp in that action.
It actually was not a good outcome.
No, unfortunately
so
not for her.
Good outcome. So we've talked a little bit there. I want to talk a little bit about your reputation online. And, you know, what does a doctor need to do to monitor their own online presence? You know, there is a reputation that needs to happen, but what do we do to monitor it?
For many dentists, they may not even have a website, they may not have any activity online, but it does not mean that they are not being reviewed. It's a little bit like the Better Business Bureau. If you've ever received a letter from them about a patient complaint and you think, I don't even belong to the Better Business Bureau, what should I do? Well, being online or having a reputation is something that you must consider carefully. The easiest way to determine what is being said about you is to go into any search engine, such as Google, Yahoo, and enter your name, enter your profession, and see what comes up. The other thing is you can use Demandforce, Reputation.com. There are vendors out there that will help you monitor your online reputation, and they will also help you to even create a website to make sure that any type of reviews are funneled through this. I can represent to you that during CDA Presents in Anaheim, we'll have a representative from Demandforce who will be part of an overall social media webcast, but seminar that we're doing, and has very insightful information that really I think will help you understand fully. But if you can't attend that, we would encourage you to check out Demandforce's website to see what they have in terms of frequently asked questions. Really, it's the 21st century, and online activity exists. And if you're not part of the party, you're going to be spoken at. You're going to be spoken about at the party. People are still going to bring you into that conversation. It's not something that you can really hide from, and it does happen. And we have plenty of dentists who call us and say, you know what, I don't understand. I had no interest whatever in being on the web, and it's been brought to my attention by my staff that there are postings about me, some good, some bad. Can't I just have all of it removed? The other thing is that with Google and Google Places, there is the ability to tie certain information into your website and to increase or enhance your visibility, and specifically the visibility of things that you want people to know about you. Sometimes you do have to take the good with the bad, and that's all a part of really leveling that playing field, making it appear as though there's nothing untoward in the postings that are out there. You can't please all of the people all of the time. Therefore, it is realistic to have the occasional bad review. There are times when you should take a look at a string of bad reviews and determine whether or not there need to be changes made within your practice. Again, this is putting it in perspective. If you see that there are frequent complaints about your intake process, how you present materials to your patients, the amount of time that they sit in your reception area, the fact that they do not like your office manager, I really think that you need to look long and hard at whether or not there need to be some changes there. We're not saying terminate your office manager. We're saying, well, let's observe her, let's make this a performance posting, a performance grading situation, and let's see whether, when she doesn't feel that I'm present, or when he doesn't feel that I'm present, that there are things that go on that are not beneficial to my practice. Again, it has to do with how the patient feels that they have been treated, even to the extent that they may make a claim against the standard of care that you have provided, because they know where to go.
I think dealing with standard of care can sometimes be a little easier, because we're talking a clinical thing. I look at it, and with the Practice Support Center, a lot of what we do is communication. And I think you're absolutely correct, is if I can take some of those negative reviews And like you said, if one negative review comes up and I've got 20, it could just have been a bad day. It could have been false. But when I've got 4 in a row, sometimes, do you have an issue? Are patients frustrated? You're booked 6 weeks out. And are you booked 6 weeks out because your scheduling is poor? So it's not, sometimes it's a training, and you do accept it and you say, thank you for bringing this to our attention. You know, we're making some efforts in our office. Do you think that's a wise move to even say, if there's several negative, to just go,
definitely.
thank you? Yeah.
Definitely. I think it's always good to be as honest and transparent as you can. You know, not to the extent that you're divulging patient information, but certainly so that you are giving the prospective patient an eye into your practice and how you approach and resolve situations such as this. No one wants to really hear that you don't care or you're not interested, or you basically don't even look at your reviews or don't attempt to respond to them. It is really something where, again, you have to take ownership. And it can be a situation where you truly believe the person who is posting this is 4 offices down and just making your life hectic. But I would hope if they have more than one person post in a frequent manner, this goes back to the algorithms that many of the review sites have in place to capture that and remove it. And then you can always appeal. You can always go through the website administrator and do what you can to get them to recognize what you see as a pattern and not necessarily a patient who has been a patient of record in your practice.
Exactly. Something that I've heard, and you know, at first I kind of thought it was funny that anyone would be asking this, but I heard it enough to know that this is a question that we have. Can an office ask a patient or say, will you please sign this, you know, that you're not going to post comments online?
There was an interesting case. It was in New York. In fact, I think it was December of 2011, and it was the New York Daily Times, I believe, that printed the story. And it had to do with Dr. I'm probably gonna butcher her name, but I want to say it's Maknevich. And she had started, well, within her practice, she was having individuals sign what was known as a mutual agreement to maintain privacy. This is something that she was requesting the patient sign so that they basically would not speak in any public forum about the care or the treatment that they received. And upon signing this, she would go ahead and complete treatment. But one of the individuals, one of her patients, came forward and said, you know, really he felt that he had come in as an emergency patient. He was very distraught at the fact that this paper was pushed in his face, and she requested he sign it before she would provide treatment. He did go ahead and sign. Later, when he went online and posted a negative review, which of course was in breach of the contract, she began charging him $100 a day until he removed it. It was a case that went before the courts, and in all honesty, I was unable to find further information as to how it resolved. But certainly it brought to light the fact that some dentists are pursuing this activity. I will let you know that it was Medical Justice who had provided her with a form, and at that time, it was reported that Medical Justice representative had spoken with Ars Technica, which is a tech website, and once again, I was unable to find this, but that in going to Ars Technica, Medical Justice indicated, you know what, we're going to discontinue the form. So potentially that doesn't exist any longer. I would say, don't go there. Don't create your own. Don't ask an attorney to do it. Don't do anything that could potentially make a patient question, why are you doing this? What is it that you're trying to keep me from saying? Has this happened to you before? Maybe I should have gone online and checked your reviews before I came in, because I wasn't doing it before, but now you've made me very curious. It really raises the level of anxiety and also perhaps a feeling from the patient, yeah, I'll sign, but I know that anything I sign, I can breach the contract. If it gets down to it and I'm unhappy about the care you've provided, I don't care if I've signed a contract. I'm going to go there, because free speech is far greater than your feeling like your feelings were hurt, especially if I do not defame you. And patients have become dangerous in their ability to go online and gather just enough information to put your relationship with them at risk. They go to dental websites and they try and determine, based upon what they've published there, whether or not the treatment you provided is consistent with what that website says. They know enough to potentially speak with friends, a friend who's an attorney. That attorney may not even specialize in personal injury or dental treatment. And they speak with the attorney and they want to know, if I sign something, what is the chance that I would be held accountable if in fact I think what the dentist did to me was something I need to hold them responsible for. So all of these things can weigh heavily on your interaction with the patient and your need to build that level of trust. You do not want the patients to feel like, hey, the minute you walk in my door, sign this. If it doesn't have to do with actual demographic information you need to collect, but is in fact something that says, I'm trying to limit your free speech, I would not go there.
Okay, great information, Carla. I think I sit back and I think of how many times when I speak to offices online, whether it's on HR issues or whether it's on clinical, and I always try and tell them, you can't have a patient sign away their rights.
Exactly.
And we've heard, I've heard from offices that attempted to use a form that essentially said, if you're not happy with my treatment, you won't sue me. If the treatment is bad, that is their right to do that, and you're absolutely correct on that. But now, we've talked about we don't want them to sign something, but we do talk about the marketing of a practice and how I want to build my practice and my patient base. Can I ask patients to go online and post something positive? Can I solicit that kind of information from them?
Certainly you can, and it is something that you may want to use as part of your marketing plan. I think it's important to discuss it with perhaps someone like Demandforce to utilize their services. One of the things that can happen specifically with Yelp is that they will not syndicate the information that is available on their website. In other words, you can't go out, grab it, and place it on your website. You have to point people to that location. And therefore, you may not be able to prohibit individuals from seeing something that you don't want them to see. Now, again, the negative review sometimes creates that air of realism. You can't please everyone, so when you have those 1 or 2 negative reviews, it is enough for people to say, yeah, that's okay, I'm not like that guy, I wouldn't complain about that, I still want to see this dentist. So really, when it comes to stating to individuals, we'd love it if you'd go online to provide your comments. You may in fact want to indicate that, we have the ability to put your endorsement on our website. Now remember, what you're doing when you do that is you're limiting who will view it. It will only be someone who will come directly to your website, and therefore you still have those postings out there that are roaming free. When you look at the internet, when you look at negative reviews or just reviews in general, it's a little bit like taking a billboard in the most busiest thoroughfare in your community and posting up their information about you and your practice. If it's good, it's great. If it's bad, it stings. It's something that you really want that billboard taken down. Unfortunately, your control over that is very limited. Sometimes, can you pay for the billboard by actually taking those reviews from your patients and posting them in places that you feel potentially will help you enhance your practice? Certainly you can. I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit here because I feel very strongly about this, and right now I know and I appreciate that you're taking your lunch hour to listen to this information. I know that you may be upset about the fact that this has happened to you or is happening to you, but as this webinar is free, I'd like you to pay now with your attention because this is the most critical information I could possibly provide to you. Part of the issue with online negative reviews and the doctors who contact us about them, it's very reactionary. It's a situation where if you ask the doctor if they recall anything that could have led to the patient posting this online, sometimes they fudge their answers a little bit, sometimes they're quite honest, but they don't feel that it was something that was so egregious that the patient would go online to report it. Again, not a licensed psychologist. Passive-aggressive behavior is something I think we all believe we know about and have heard about and will see. And sometimes a patient will go home. They'll talk to family and friends, and that's where they'll be given the idea, you know what, why don't you just post something online? That will make sure they never do that again. We're talking about communication. We're talking about the ability to realize when a situation is escalating and do your best to provide the patient with the resources to reach out to you. Now, that's going on the assumption that what is printed out there is true. But generally there is a kernel of truth in the information that is given. If you don't know if this is your patient and don't suspect that they are, we provided you with the tools in which to respond to that. But it's very critical that you look at the worth of your practice, the value of your practice as being your patients. Without them, your practice wouldn't exist. So you really have to put a great deal of effort in knowing what your patient wants, being realistic not only in what you can offer to them. In other words, don't overpromise and underdeliver. Don't let them think that the picture they bring in is what you are going to make them look like. You have to have some of those hard discussions with the patient, and sometimes you even have to say to the patient, you know what, I'm not comfortable taking your case. This is where I need to part company with you. I'm not going to start that treatment. I think it's best that you go elsewhere, especially when it's a new patient. You're inheriting that individual from somewhere. You need to make sure that you do your homework. You need to research the situation. You need to ask them, when was the last time you saw a dentist? Who was that dentist? Would you complete an authorization so that I may receive your records? You need to find out who you are inviting into your office, because if it's not seen as discriminatory, you can release that person from your care before you even touch them. You need to make sure that the patients you have in the practice are the patients who will stay with you for the long run. That means that even when economic times are hard and you put offerings out there for free bleaching or no x-ray charges, come in and we'll do the exam and you don't have to pay for that, there is a certain element of patient that you are attracting that you may not want to keep. All of these things are very critical for you to understand in terms of being proactive and protecting your practice, protecting your profits. Trust me, if you take care of the patient's safety and satisfaction, the profits will follow. So that's what you need to do. So this is a new day. This is a day for you to really rethink how you're approaching some of these patients and how well you're documenting the interaction. I have seen postings that say, wow, brand new decor, but his chairside manner's still crappy. I think I'm going to find another dentist. I have seen postings that state, well, you know what? I went to this dentist for the first time, and based on what they told me, I'm not returning. Was that a bad thing? Not necessarily, especially if the individual goes into the specifics of what it is that they did not like about the initial encounter with your office. These are things that you can look at and determine, is this really what happened with that patient? And if it is, what can we do to improve upon it? So while negative reviews are extremely disappointing and can in fact be difficult to divorce from a very personal feeling about what was said about you, about your staff, about your practice's ability to treat a patient with respect, it's definitely something that you can use as a practice builder.
Carla, you've given great information today. I think, I hope that everyone heard and listened and maybe can make some changes when they go back. If anything, remember, everything's not so personal. We've also got an amazing amount of questions that have come in. So what I want to let you know is if we don't get to your question today, we are going to post on the Compass with, probably within the week, a Q&A of the questions that came through with the answers. So if today you didn't see Carla or I be able to answer these, rest assured we'll find the answers. Also, some of the questions, while I'm going to ask them to Carla, I know she's not the right person. But what we can do is let you know where you can find that information. Carla also mentioned at CDA Presents Anaheim and San Francisco, this is just a piece of a social media course. Carla provides it, Demandforce does. We have an attorney that speaks on the legal implications. It is an all-day course that I think many of you could find fascinating, especially in light of everything that Carla has supplied to us. So let me jump in and let's answer, or let's see if we can answer some questions, Carla.
Sounds good.
Okay. When a patient comes into a practice, great question, and they said they've seen a negative review, what should the doctor then say to that patient?
I think it's fair to indicate to the patient that you appreciate them sharing this information with you. I think it's interesting, or it would be interesting, to determine what about the review, how did they feel about what they read. I think it's fine to open that dialogue. Sometimes it's an indication that that patient is supportive of your practice and wants to do what they can to make you aware. But sometimes it's an indication that the patient is actually trying to determine, okay, would you cut me a deal? Would you, probably be less, how should I put it, be less harsh with me, or stick to your guns about certain office standards if you felt that somebody had complained about this. One of the things I can let you know is we have received calls where dentists have told us that a patient will actually say to them, if you do not do this treatment for me, if you do not give me this discount, if you do not, basically let me dictate treatment, I'm going to go online and I'm going to post a review.
I've heard that as well.
And this is where you document that in the chart, because it shows their intent. So later, if they do, then it's malicious intent. They're out to hurt you, because it's based upon the fact that you would not provide them with something they needed. But going back to the heart of the question that you mentioned, which is, okay, so they come in and they tell me that I have a negative review online. Hopefully, if you're monitoring your Webbutation, you're already aware of it. If it's something that you're not aware of, it's fine to say to them, well, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Can you let me know which website? Can you let me know what was said? Because we do like to handle these things personally. Again, you're talking about a prospective patient who you want to show them, hey, I'm on it. I'm interested, I'm listening, and certainly I want to address whatever the issue was. If that individual actually says to you, well, what I read was that you overcharge. You are always busy, and I have to wait so many months, to get a follow-up visit after this one. Those are things that hopefully within your office policies or protocols you can respond to. If you feel that what they're providing you is really a line of bunk, then that may be a way to say to them, well, certainly you can sit in the chair today, let's see how this goes. You can begin to ask those questions that I indicated earlier about when's the last time you saw a dentist? What was the dentist's name? Will you fill out the authorization so I can speak to that individual? Because these will be indicators to you of whether this patient is a keeper. Have they not been to the dentist in several years? Are they unwilling to let you speak with their previous dentist? Do they have unfinished or incomplete treatment? Are they mid-treatment in some respect? All of these things are great ways to say to them, I really appreciate your coming in and sharing that information with me. However, I don't think I'm the dentist for you. I would really recommend that you work with the local dental society, 1-800, dentist, just even through your insurance agency, and find someone else. Again, even if they go online and say, well, apparently when I came in and I mentioned that they had a negative review online, this is the way they treated me. They basically said they weren't going to see me.
Yep.
Again, that patient is telling more about themselves to everyone who reads it than you are.
It's kind of one of those also. What I always think about is that if someone comes in and says, I read this online and Daniel Jackson said that you did this crown, remember you've got privacy issues you're dealing with too. When you're responding to a patient, to be able to say, where did you see it, but knowing that you can't, well, actually, I didn't even do a bridge on that patient. I did too, you don't want to go there. You want to be able to keep that privacy of the patient, but also recognize, thank you for bringing it to our attention. I'm sure that we will be monitoring that. Mm-hmm. This kind of piggybacks on another question that we got, is a doctor had a patient that said they would remove the negative response for money. So it's kind of what you were saying is, I will go on and post it. What do you think they should do? I know what I would do, but so.
And again, that patient is basically showing their hand. Mm-hmm. The information you can take and place into the patient record because it relates to their treatment, and it's fine to include that. You do want to make clear to them that that's not something you're willing to do. That's their right as a consumer. Reviews exist for the for really the reason is if for some reason they're dissatisfied, but it's also an indication of, okay, then we're done. I need to dismiss you as a patient. There's no reason to retain an individual. And too often I see this from doctors. There's a fear of, number one, attorneys as patients. Attorneys are people. And sometimes if you have them in the chair and you ask them, well, what do you specialize in? You're going to find that they don't know really anything about dentistry and anything about personal injury. Sometimes they're estate planning attorneys, real estate attorneys. They handle contracts. It's not anything even close to what you do as a dentist. So are you fearful that they're going to sue you? Well, attorneys may think they're pretty darn special, but they're same as everybody else, and every patient can eventually get an attorney if necessary. So there's always the potential for an attorney to be attached. So when you're fearful of that situation, do your best to say either all of my patients are special or none of them are. And I would say go with everybody being special. Treat every patient with the same level of care, the same level of documentation, everything that you can to ensure that for whatever reason they are trusting in your ability to provide treatment and to oversee the direction of their care.
One question was, both of us have mentioned Demandforce a couple times, and how can you get in contact with them? An easy way to do it is if you go to cda.org, you go to endorsed programs, and when you go to endorsed programs, there'll be a link to Demandforce. Carla and I mentioned them, and we, not a sales pitch for Demandforce. It's just they're held to a standard as an endorsed program, but also they work with dentists.
Yes.
That's what they do. So they understand the importance of reputation. They all, and they will monitor that. They have a lot of different features they can do. We are coming down to the end, but there is a question I find kind of interesting, and I'm going to squeeze it in here.
Okay.
Is that if you believe it's fictitious, I don't know who this patient is, I don't know anything, is it okay for me to go on and say, I'm not going to respond to this because I think it's fictitious? Should you do that?
You've already responded. You've already responded.
Yep.
By putting that out there, again,
Yep.
you've already tipped your hand. So I think if you think it's fictitious and you don't want to respond to it, don't. But, sometimes the best thing is to simply determine whether or not you're the bigger person and capable of saying, reach out to us. We're here. You can contact us at this number, or, we try to provide the best service to all of our patients. So at this time, we would like to speak with you about this situation. But I would say by going out there and actually stating, I believe this is fictitious and I'm not going to respond to it, you already have.
Thank you, Carla. This was a lot of information. I think we talked today, I hope we covered everything we said we would. The takeaways that I got even is it's communication. And we say that across the board so many times. But what you really want to do is to be really aware of what your patients are. Like you said, it's knowing when it's not a good match. We talk to dentists all the time about withdrawing from care, and I always say that you probably knew you weren't a good fit a lot earlier than you let on. So when you're looking at, don't take everything personally. Understand that if you're not involved in social media, you're involved in social media. If you have a Facebook page, it really doesn't matter that someone can post. If you need additional information, the Practice Support Center, which is through the CDA Compass, has a tremendous amount of resources related to this topic, as well as risk management through TDIC. Both of these departments are also there to answer your questions. A lot of people think that you're kind of treading your waters on your own, and Carl and I can probably attest that everyone's in the same boat. Everyone's got questions about addressing negativity. So utilize the Practice Support Center, utilize the risk management department. If you are able to, I truly recommend attending the all-day social media. I have attended it, and a wealth of knowledge, and then you can also bring in your questions. Stay tuned to the Compass website. Carla, her team, my team are going to get together, look at these questions, and make sure that we answer all of them for you. And then thank you all for giving up your lunch hour today, and stay tuned. We're going to have more webinars for you. Thank you.
Thank you.